Hello and welcome to another edition of Power of the Pen. I am Luana Bradford, and I'm excited to bring to you a very special guest, Howard Langer, who is a former antitrust lawyer turned novelist. And the amazing thing about this gentleman and his brilliance is his latest novel, The Last Dekrepitzer, has become an award-winning book. It received the 2025 National Jewish Book Award, and this book brings into focus the intersect between Hasidic Jewish culture and the African American culture. And the story takes place in the Deep South. And it talks about the traditions, particularly that of music, how it shapes cultural awareness and even transformation. So, in just a moment, we will see and meet and have an amazing conversation with none other than Mr. Howard Langer. How's it going, Mr. Langer?
Very well, thank you. Very well, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me, and congratulations on your book and the award. That's an amazing accomplishment. So tell me a little bit about your backstory and what inspired you to write this particular book at a time such as now.
Okay, well, my backstory is I was a lawyer and law professor. I still am, actually. And in 2020, I guess, or 2021, during COVID, I watched a presentation by the author George Saunders. And it was on writing. And he said, if you want to write, you got to stop thinking about it. You got to do it. And I was age 70, and I started the next morning. I felt this had to be. I always wanted to write a novel.
So I want to ask this in this way. Your protagonist was able to survive the Holocaust and immigrated to the U.S. But rather than your story taking place where most immigrants find themselves, which is in the Northeast, yours ended up traveling to Mississippi. Why did you choose that place to frame and shape this story?
There were two reasons. First, when I sat down to write, I wanted to write something that explained Black culture to Jews and Jewish culture to African Americans. But I also didn't want to write some kind of allegory or anything. I wanted to write a novel about real people. So I felt that if, as was the case, this Hasidic rabbi who had lost everything, everyone in his community had been killed, was brought to rural Mississippi, that would allow me to do two things. First, it would allow me to have this character introduced to America, not in the Northeast, but through the culture of rural Africa America. Okay, and he does. He learns their music. He speaks Black English. He preaches. On the other hand, it also sets up the latter part of the book where they're in New York, and he's totally isolated. By that point, he's a white man who speaks Black English. He's an immigrant who's lost his entire community. And at that point, he's married to a Black woman, which in 1950s New York was itself a tremendously isolating event. So it did two things. It allowed me to, while they were in the South, show the similarities between African American culture in the rural South and the culture from which this man came from in Eastern Europe, small towns, deeply religious, lots of community, tremendous poverty.
So I know you intertwined deeply music, and music was part of his identity before coming to the U.S. And he discovered the blues, which is based in suffering and the spirituals. You know, it's a cry, a deep spiritual cry that has been the foundation of so many musical genres. How, for those that are interested in this book, how can music help shape and transform and be that bridge um, with cultural divides?
Well, what I do in the book is, and it becomes um, more pronounced in the second half of the book, is I compare different people's musics, different people who had spiritual musics. First, when he is in the South, he's very taken by the music of the church. And he also joins this blues and gospel group. He becomes the third person in the group. But when he gets to New York, he plays on the streets with the Reverend Gary Davis, who was a real person. He was a blind guitar player. Many people thought he was the greatest guitar player of his time. But for 25 years, it was said that he only played religious music on the streets. His goal was to bring people to Jesus. And I thought, how interesting would it be to have this Hasidic rabbi who has his world of fiddling playing on the streets with Gary Davis? How would they interact? And I didn't know. You know, I researched Gary Davis very much. I met several of his former students, who incidentally were both Jewish. And I mixed them together and saw how they came together and what they did together. And they had very different musics and very different goals in their music.
Yes. If your protagonist could speak to us today, with all the challenges that we're facing here in the U.S., and really being able to open ourselves up to understanding other cultures and bridging that communication divide and creating communities of acceptance, what do you think he would say today? Because he changed his name to Sam. Was it Light Up, I believe?
Yeah, that's a translation of his Hebrew name.
Ah, okay. Thank you. So what would he say to us today? If
He would say that I would think that he would say that the most important thing that's being strangled is one-to-one relationships. In other words, people get along fine with each other on a one-to-one basis. Black people and white people who are friends are oblivious to their color. Jews and Christians, similarly. Democrats and Republicans, similarly. But once we group people together into groups, Blacks, Jews, Democrats, Republicans nowadays, we bad things start to happen. So I would stress that it's crucial that things remain on a one-to-one basis. And the internet is very much destroying that, because we can see the level of discourse that goes on in email and so on is something that would never go on in face-to-face conversations between people.
I love how you frame that, because as you were talking, I thought about my father, who I lost a year ago, and he lived to 94, served for 30 years in the military. And when he grew up in a little tiny German community in Missouri, and his best friends were all white. And so it goes back to what you were saying. For them, it was just that relationship, and they stayed in relationship with each other until death. And he said the bond was just undeniable. They were brothers. But he also spoke about what you're saying is when he went into the military, then there became this sort of us and them, because he joined a segregated army. And that's when, for him, his blackness was more apparent than ever before, even though he knew he was black in America.
Well, I'll tell you, there's a scene in my book in the beginning which comes directly from my father's experience in World War II. My father was a sailor. He served on the USS Missouri, which was the flagship of the Navy. And he saw an incident where a black sailor was ordered by an officer to dance. And that man had no choice but to stand there and dance in front of that officer because he was on the ship and he had no recourse. And my father was, from New York. He'd never seen anything like that. I heard that the great saxophone player Lester Young, who was from New York, when he went into the army, it broke him as a human being because of the discrimination he faced in the South. So yes, I'm glad that your father's experience eventually morphed into something better, but I can only imagine what it was like in the beginning.
Yes. When you wrote this book, as it was unfolding, number one, what inspired you the most about your discovery? Because you said you were researching these different individuals and then developing your fictionalized characters. And what shaped you even more as an author, as far as what you're thinking of going beyond this first novel to the next?
That's a very good question. I really haven't thought about that. The way it got written, it was first a short story of this man who was busking with a fiddle in a subway station in New York City and was discovered by a person who starts conversing with him, discovers that he is this Hasidic rabbi who has lost all of his sect and is the only survivor. And the story was published in an online magazine, and someone told me that's not a short story, it's a novel. And I went home and thought to myself, how did he end up in that subway station? And I began learning as I wrote the book. I would come downstairs to my wife and say to her, you won't believe what happened to the Rebbe today, because I didn't know beforehand what was going to happen. And I didn't write it in chronological fashion. Different chapters came to me at different points in time until at a certain point when they get to New York City, things coalesced and it began to develop more naturally. But I didn't have a concept going in of a beginning. I knew what the end was because the end was the short story of him fiddling, but I did not know where it was going. I don't think I really answered your question, but
no, actually you did, and I love that, because we also have authors who are tuning into this, or aspiring authors, and sometimes we're inspired different ways. There's a different muse around us in order to create, I guess, to ignite that creative spark in us. And I love how you said you didn't write this in chronological order. It was as you were inspired, as you saw these different moments of Sam's journey. And in your opinion today, using this book, even though it's fictional, there are some deep lessons that we can learn, that we could take away from, I think that can help inform and shape us. And what would be the number one thing? Because you mentioned the importance of one-on-one relationships, but is there something else that we can take away from this story?
Well, there's a whole other piece that we haven't discussed, which is the spiritual piece. Okay. This man fiddles before the war. He fiddles because he has this extraordinary love of God, and he can't even express it in words. So he goes and supplements his words with music. The war comes, and this is a man who had almost the entire corpus of Jewish tradition in his head from his education. But he believes that he's been totally betrayed by God because he's pretty much destroyed his people. 6 million people killed in the most awful way. In addition, this man was in the book was in the Russian army during the war. And when he went across the Ukraine, which had been filled with Jews before the war, there were none to be seen. They'd all been murdered. In my book, the character actually tries to impress on the people in the South and says, imagine if you came to Louisiana and Mississippi and there were no Black people anymore, that they'd all been taken out and shot. And that's really what happened. So post-war, he fiddles, but he has no doubt that there's a God, but he fiddles in defiance of God to remind God every day, quote, of what he did to his people. And so he has this very bitter relationship with a God he believes exists. And by contrast, his wife, who ends up a Black person in New York married to a white person, very isolated, and she'd become Jewish, which made her even further isolated because their only friends were Gary Davis and his wife. And Gary Davis's wife can't understand how a Black woman from the South could have converted to Judaism. It's just beyond her. She's, a very devout woman. But she has this love of God that comes, I think, from her Christianity that she brings to her Judaism. And so what my book really explores is this complex nature of different spiritualities, which I think is a very important part of the book.
I love that. And as you defined it, I think so often we, in our own limited human experience, we try to compartmentalize God and what spirituality is. And as you said, he was unable to express in words, but then through his music, he created this divine connection and expression. Even though it may have been resentment, it was still this communication. This is Luana's interpretation now. There's this prayer going back and forth to God in music. And then the fact that we can blend cultures, even though we may have come from different faiths, we can still complement one another. We can still lift one another. We can still support one another. And I think that's what I heard you saying with his wife, and bringing, even though she converted to Judaism, there is still a Christian imprint that's on her. That,
I mean, the rabbi occasionally muses, if I had Jesus in my life early on, maybe I'd understand this woman, because he understands that there's something fundamentally different about where she comes from and what her spirituality is, even that she brings to his spirituality.
Yes. Well, before we're almost out of time. I could talk to you on and on. I have so many questions. What's next for you, and in this book, and in your journey now as a novelist?
Well, I'll tell you, I started writing this book when I was 70, and I didn't know whether I'd write anything more. But when I read the comments, both critics and, more importantly, the different things people have written on Amazon and on Goodreads about the last Dekrepitzer, I've just been blown away. So I have sat down and I'm trying to write another novel. It's quite different. It's in some way based on, very loosely, on my parents' marriage and the years, those years. And again, I'm kind of writing in a way that isn't chronological, so I don't know where it's going. I don't know whether I'll be able to attach the different pieces to each other, but that's what I've been working on.
Of that. Well, Mr. Langer, it has been an honor and a privilege to have you on our platform. I've ordered my book. I'm waiting for it to come because just all the reviews that I was reading, it's really compelling me. I definitely want to read it, and would love to stay connected with you if at all possible. But it truly has been an honor to have you as a guest on Power the Pen.
Well, I've been particularly happy to be on your broadcast, particularly because I've managed to get the book pretty widely disseminated in the Jewish community, but it's been very, very difficult for me to get its exposure in the African American community. And a big part of it was my goal. That was my goal. In fact, I added a glossary at the end after it was published to make it even more accessible. But thank you so much, because I really appreciated talking to you.
Thank you, and be blessed, be well, and everyone, you can get a copy of this book, The Last Dekrepitzer. Am I pronouncing that correct?
Dekrepitzer, like the word decrepit.
Dekrepitzer on Amazon. Go to Goodreads, look at the reviews. I think you will be pleasantly surprised, and I'm anxiously awaiting. I think it's supposed to arrive today, so that I can read it. And again, thank you so very much, Mr. Langer.
You be well.
You too. Bye for now.
Power of the Pen with Luana Bradford, expanding the impact and influence of authors from around the world. If you want to change the world, pick up your pen and write, said Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Books are uniquely portable magic. Power of the Pen spotlights authors from around the world. Listen as authors share messages that educate, motivate, inspire, and entertain. Join us each Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern on e360tv.com.
Hello and welcome back to Power of the Pen. I'm excited that we have a spotlight feature for you today. I am here joined by David Medansky, and we are here to discuss his book, A Path Forward, Echoes of a Second Chance. He is known as a weight loss expert, author, but you also have your beginnings in law. So, David, how did you go from the legal field to weight loss and now authorship?
I was a former divorce attorney.
Ah.
And so I needed to leave the legal practice for my own health. Unfortunately, I was taking on clients' issues as my own issues and wasn't able to detach. And I got my wake-up call in July of 2016 at age 61 when the doctor told me, based on my lab results and being fat, I had a 95% chance for a fatal heart attack. I lost 50 pounds during the next 4 months. I kept it off. And then in June of 2022 at age 67, I hiked up Mount Kilimanjaro, 70 and approaching 71 in a few months. So I just want people to be able to think in positive terms of they're not getting old, they're getting older, and that they can be a participant in life instead of a spectator in life. And so I wrote A Path Forward. This is the fiction book about Michael Caldwell's journey and his wake-up call to reflect on our choices during life and to make decisions. And Michael Caldwell, along his journey, meets various guides and mentors. They're historical figures. Anne Frank is one of them. Gandhi is one of them. Hippocrates, Jack LaLanne, and many others. And it's short stories. So it's not a diet book. It's not a how-to book. It's just a story for you to reflect on your own lives and as a mirror of what you're doing.
As I started reading this, I felt like your personal journey has an imprint on it. But as you said, it's these short stories. But at the end, there's a guide. You have 10 key principles that people
Correct.
can use to apply in their lives, correct?
Correct. There are 10 key principles, and they're woven in throughout the book. And then they're summarized at the end of the book, so you can go in one place after you finish reading it to get more information. So it's a combination of how Andy Andrews approached his book with the Traveler's Gift and how Og Mandino approached his book with The Greatest Salesman in the World. And I combined their two techniques with my own message and my own stories. And so far, the feedback from people who have read it they've been very surprised and pleased. It's a quick read. It's got a lot of information. And the most important thing is it's entertaining and not boring.
Yeah, it's actually, keeping me interested in, like you said, it's short stories, and people remember stories, and stories impact your heart space and ultimately help you to inform your choices. And I love how you took those two styles, and as you said, you took that as a mirror in how you were going to tell the story. And in some cases, it's, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's a little bit of your memoir through the lens of your lead character, but it gives messages of hope through each of these individuals that he's encountering. Yes?
Oh, absolutely. It's a mirror of my life. A lot of people have said, this reminds me of you. I don't want to give away too much of the book, but yeah, it's a lot of reflection. It's a lot of where a lot of people are at, when they're in their 50s and 60s. And a lot of times we will sacrifice our health when we're younger in pursuit of wealth. And then as we get older, we're spending our wealth in pursuit of health. And so I wanted to get the message across is before you get to that point, of where I was. We're getting a wake-up call. Hey, start making small little changes now. I made the stories short so that people can get through them. And the thing is, if you don't remember the story, remember the lesson. And that's the more important thing, is that there are lessons in there. And I did in a way so it wasn't preachy, it wasn't lecturing. My sister read the book, and she read for the first 3 or 4 chapters, and I asked her what she thought. She says, a little preachy for me. I said, okay, that's fair. And then a couple of days later, I saw her and she said, I got into it. It was really good. I liked it. And I said, oh, okay. Because if my sister liked it, that meant a lot to me, because she's very critical and judgmental. And I appreciate her honest feedback.
Now, with this book going forward, obviously you want to change lives, inspire lives to make better choices to live the best quality, healthy life possible. But what if people want to go beyond this? Do you actually work with individuals in helping to improve their overall health?
I do. At the end of the book, there's an invitation to join our Life 42 Health Direction Reset community. And there's a free standard tier so people can join with no obligation and get some great value and learn to apply some of the lessons from the book into their lives. Again, it's the Life 42, and it's all discussed in the book how you can enroll. And again, it's free. If you want more one-on-one coaching with me, you can always upgrade. I do have a program. It's only $47 a month. I kept it very inexpensive so that people can afford it. My main focus is making an impact in a positive way to help as many people get off the weight loss drugs, eat healthier, be aware of what's happening so that they can be a participator in life as opposed to a spectator. So if you have kids or grandkids, you want to be able to, go out, get on the floor with them, play with them, instead of watching. Just be able to walk up the flight of stairs or, go for a hike and do things that are physically active. Again, instead of saying, no, I'm not able to do it, or just watching on the sidelines.
Yeah, I love that. My father, who passed away a year ago, he lived to 94, and he was active his whole life. In fact, he became a grandfather at age 75 for the first time. And when we went as a family to Disney World, at that time, my dad was 80 years old when we went, carrying his grandchildren on his shoulders throughout the park. And I looked at him, I said, that's what I want as I age.
Exactly. I understand exactly what you're saying. My mom is 92. She still lives in her own home. She still drives. She got her new driver's license. I go over there on Sundays. We play card games and rummy cue. She's very sharp. She plays bridge during the week, and she's physically active, and you would never know she's 92. And I agree with you. I mean, when people go to Disney World or other theme parks, to be able to carry a grandchild is fantastic, or even go on the rides, or just be able to walk on your own and not have to be pushed around in a wheelchair. I mean, that's amazing.
Yes. And choice. Before we go on, I want to talk about that, because I'm hearing a lot of people coming up with excuses. I call it, you've been infected by excusitis, any excuse will do. And when choice, you have to be responsible and accountable for the decisions that you make. And I get, we have environmental factors and stressors in our lives, but there are some things that we can control. So if you wouldn't mind just taking a couple minutes and speak directly to the audience about that. And again, how this book and these stories can serve as an ignition, if you will, to spark that change in their lives.
Yeah, it's a guide of the book, and you can make small little changes based on the stories that are and the lessons that are in there. And again, it's choices we make. Do you want to drink a glass of water, or do you want to drink a soda or a diet soda? Do you want the glass of water, or do you want the glass of fruit juice or fruit flavored beverages? Do you want to eat a large meal, or do you want to eat a smaller meal? Because a lot of times our portions have been supersized and people don't realize it. And it's like you said, little daily choices. It's a lifestyle, so it's not a diet. And that's what the book puts out there. It talks about eating slower, about getting more adequate sleep. It's not just how to do things or what to do or how to do. It's also why. Why would you want to do it? Why is it important to do it? And that's the message that comes across with these stories. And it gets you thinking about, oh, how would I apply this to my own life? What can I do to make better choices?
I love that. Well, David, thank you so very much for joining us for this spotlight on Power of the Pen. You can get your book, A Path Forward, Echoes of a Second Chance by David Medansky, on Amazon. And as he mentioned, if you want to connect with him, work with him, be a part of his community, all of those resources are included in the book. Yes?
Yes. Thank you so much, Luana. I appreciate the time and the opportunity to get the message across.
Thank you. Be safe, be well.